Is recording. And I will screen. Okay. So hope everybody is feeling like spring is springing. Oh, come on, there we go. So we're going to talk briefly about your application submission. That will be a whole other training. Talk about public school funding, guidance from one of our peer reviewers who happens to be with us today. I'm going to focus on the academic framework part of the application and your questions. But at 11 o'clock, we're going to have Chris Narkun from PCS&M come. So wherever I am, if I'm not finished with something, we'll just pause and hear from him and then come back to whatever is left. And I will send this presentation materials out to you when we're done. So the application is, we're working on transferring our application into our Epicenter platform. We have some more tasks internally to make sure that it's functioning well. Why am I telling you this? Because you are probably working on your application now. You're probably filling out the application that you uploaded from our website, which is perfectly fine. You can continue to do that, but you will then probably be cutting and pasting that part of what you've written into the application into this other platform. It's basically the same as our application. And you can, if you haven't started on your application, it's fine. And you can, enter it into that platform. But it's perfectly fine to be writing it wherever you're writing it electronically, and then you can just transfer it over. So I just wanted to let you all know that. And we're going to be scheduling a training for everybody with Epicenter to walk us through that once it's all ready. All right, so next I want to talk about public school funding and how the state equalization guarantee is generated for your money. And Nicola, if you can make sure you're letting people in, that'd be helpful for me. Thanks. All right, so nearly all state level school district operational funds are distributed through the public school fund. Revenues are derived from the general fund, the current school fund, and the federal mineral leasing revenue. There's only one significant state appropriation that is not distributed through the public school fund, which is the free textbook appropriation, which is made from federal mineral leasing revenue. And the free textbook allocation is made up based on the 40th day membership count. So you don't have 40th day membership count for that fund until you're up and running. So the state equalization guarantee is designed to equalize educational opportunities. It's quite innovative, and it dates back to the late 70s, I believe, in that we don't base our funding on how much income, how much property tax everybody pays for a district. We determine the needs of the student, of the individual, and fund the student as an individual and what based on their needs. So, if you have a first grade student who's receiving special education services throughout the state, they get the same regardless of where they live. Although there are some factors in the United States, where we are in New Mexico that are determined, that that determine a part of the amount, but I'll get into that. So, let's see, the Public School Finance Act allows the legislature to set a single statewide amount for the public school funding. So the base rate for students, in every legislative session, the legislature will vote on what the base unit value is for our students in New Mexico. So then there are other numbers that are factored into that base unit value. So typically it's considered that 75% of traditional public school district or public charter schools operating budget is discretionary. Although certain programs have mandatory requirements, and the PED is required to ensure schools prioritize programs and methods linked to student achievement. This allows schools to spend funding formula dollars to best meet the specific needs of their communities and encourages schools to minimize costs to allow funding to be used for other priorities. And so for me, and I ask, like think about how your board's going to monitor this. I've heard over the years, we don't get enough money for special ed services. Well, your special ed students are generating special education income dollars to you, and you have costs associated with that. You have staffing costs, material costs. So the money comes to the school kind of in a lump sum, except for some of that money that, is specific to title funding. And so it doesn't come with, here are your special education dollars, and here are your general education dollars, and here are these dollars. It comes in a bucket. Well, it doesn't come in a bucket, but it comes, in a imaginary bucket. And so if and when I serve on a board, so when I retire, I will definitely serve on a charter schools board in our state. But, I would want to know, well, how much special ed money are our students generating, and how much of that money are we having to, are we using it all to pay for our special education teachers, or do we have to supplement that with external general ed dollars? What is that amount that we're getting? And so, the money, your students, your special ed students, your English language learner students, your low income students, they all generate funds. And you are also spending money based on those needs. And I think it would be valuable to have reports on does this, particularly special education, English language learners, the money those students are generating, how are we using that money? Are we using it effectively? So program cost is the amount of money assumed under the funding formula to be necessary for a given district with a particular configuration of students and educational programs to provide educational services. And the state equalization guarantee is the amount of money that the state of New Mexico guarantees to provide to you to defray most of the program costs, right? So there's not an expectation at the state's level that all of the SEG money is enough to cover all of your costs. So in education, we use lots of acronyms throughout the application, and some of the appendices that you'll be filling out, we refer to students as MEM, or short for member. So under, and particularly in this SEG. So we're looking as, so one student is one MEM. If you were to have a half-day kindergarten program, a student would be 0.5 MEM. Does that make sense? I hope so.
Okay.
Yes.
May I just say hi to the group. Welcome everybody to the training. I'm Karina, the director of the Charter Schools Division. I really appreciate Missy does such a wonderful job, but I wanted to pause on that point that that slide that she was just on, which was talking about how pre-K students might be counted as part of this form if they are, I think the wording on the slide was maybe developmentally disabled, or there are a few programs where pre-K can be counted, but if you have a regular pre-K program, you generally will not be counting that in your SEG. I know that that's a little tricky, but I just wanted to ensure that there was clarity around the distinction. And I'm not sure if when we get to the part where the peer reviewer is going to discuss who give their presentation, that's part of today's agenda, if they'll be able to offer additional insight into the forms which may automatically generate that, or if it's something that the school must project. Do you know off the top of your head, Missy? Or does anybody in the room know when
So
you're
they
doing
have,
the nine? Yeah,
they have to project
okay.
the 910B5. They don't, they can't say that they're going to have any developmentally delayed they can't, any different levels. They can predict based on the district in which they're going to locate kind of average. But
For special ed.
first, right. So,
Okay. All
and we
right,
will be
just
going
wanted
over
to,
that more.
okay, all right. And at some point, I do want to just check in with all the applicants on how they're doing. When you think that works, Missy. Thanks.
Okay, we'll do it after this section. So you will all, if you are approved, you will all become intimately familiar with 40th day, 80th day, and 120th day. Those are the official days in which your student population is looked in on by the public education department. You're reporting data to PED and then verifying, that our numbers are in agreement. So the 40th day is the second Wednesday in October. It's not literally the 40th day after you've opened up, because it's just an average of when schools open up. The 80th day is the first working day in December, and the 120th day is the second Wednesday in February. And so if you put in your application and you get approved, and then you're submitting all sorts of things during your implementation year, including a new 910B5 budget and more accurate enrollment projections. You could project that you're going to have 100 students. And then on the second Wednesday in October, the PED will be checking to see how many students you have. And you could have 110, or you could have 80. And the public education department will adjust the money that they've been sending you accordingly. So if they've been sending you money for 100 students from July, August, September, and then they've sent it to you for October, it's 4 months. Then October comes around, they're checking your numbers. It takes time to get everything verified, but then they will adjust the amount of money they're sending you accordingly, either up or down, based on those numbers. So it is important for you all to be as accurate as possible, because it's nice to get money for students you don't have for 4 months, you don't want to get yourself into a position where you have to pay that back. And we have had some schools have to do, not necessarily, they didn't have to pay anything back, but they stopped receiving money from the PED in the springtime because they'd already been paid out everything that their student population warranted. So then the school was not receiving any SEG money for months after that, which makes it really hard to balance your budget and to pay your bills. So it's really important to be as accurate as you can so that you're not in a position where you are having to receive less dollars throughout the school year. It's something that your board should be focused on. Your board should be made aware of and have a plan for how they're going to deal with any kind of decrease in money coming in. An increase in money is easy to deal with. Nobody has a problem with that, but figuring out what you're going to do if you have a decrease of money. There's other funding that is determined. So once you're past your first year, the school budget people are going to look at the average of your 80th day and 120th day count for predicting next year's enrollment. And then also if you end up doing transportation, the transportation amount that's reimbursed to you is based on an average ridership number taken on the, I believe, 80th day. So once we have your your membership numbers, then there's additional adjusted program units added to that. Those include the teachers that are certified by the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, the at-risk factors, charter school student activities, and then the grand total of all these is then multiplied by the unit value for that school year, resulting in your program guarantee. The funding, so the base unit value is first augmented by the grade level that your students are in. So the students who are kindergartners, the base unit value is multiplied by 1.44 units. They're one of the higher level categories because typically you have to have more room and more a lower student to teacher ratio for your students, so they cost a bit more. Then the units drop from first through third grade, and then they go up again in high school. So, but I do have a slide with that written out, and here it is. So if you take the current base unit value that the legislature just voted on this session, and you add the weighting to it, these are the amounts that you get. So you can see the half-day kindergarten is 0.720, the full-day kindergarten is 1.44, then we go down to 1.2 for first graders, second and third is 1.18, fourth and through sixth, 1.045, and then seventh through 12th, 1.250. Again, because typically high school students, they don't have just one teacher, they have multiple teachers, they have chemistry labs and things like that. So your students are generating, as of this current base unit value, these are the basic program units you would get. The staff cost multiplier is something that your staff will generate. Again, so this is going to be, everything's a prediction in this first year, thinking about, are we going to find teachers with, lots of experience or very little experience? And then they have licensure levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. And so the teacher cost index calculates, you would um, it's works in the formula to help generate more base unit value. And so where there are blanks here, like there's no, you really can't be a level 2 teacher with 0 to 2 years of experience. The expectation is that if you have 3 to 5 years of experience, you are capable of being a level 2. If you don't, you're not capable of being a level 2 or a level 3. Then there are special education units, excuse me. We also consider special education students to be those students who are gifted. The special education programs are defined in the public school code and provide you want outside of the regular classroom that involve, some type of modification. So these are the kids with 504 plans, IEPs, things like that. They are determined. Sometimes you'll get students who have these IEPs and 504 plans, and sometimes you will evaluate those students and determine that they have a learning difference. And that's something that will have to be built into your programs in your school. All of these things are categorized in how your students are told to the PED. So when you're enrolling students, your coordinator, your registrar, the person who's going to be doing that needs to be very accurate in how they're putting student information into the code so that the public education department knows, this is a special ed student, this is an English language learner student, this is a low income student. You need to know what grade they're in. And so all those things are what help build the fund. So with special education units, students are classified as A, B, C, and D. And A, B is treated the same. Those the least amount of learning different. I personally think that everybody on the planet is probably a level A at least. We all have some type of learning need. Maybe you can remember your phone number, but you're not great at math, like me. So that type of thing. So level A, B, that's the minimal amount of intervention that a student needs. Then level C is a step up. Level D is the highest class, the highest need for students. Although there's level DD, so maybe that's the highest. But no, that's developmentally disabled 3 and 4-year-olds, excuse me. So if any of you are having a preschool program, which is different. And then they also include the ancillary staff. So these are the special ed teachers. In your first year, you'll probably have to be contracting with an REC to get special ed teachers, unless you're able to hire full-time special education teachers. And that is another thing. It's the FTE, the full-time equivalency. You may or may not have special education staff that's a full-time employee. So a lot of schools, this is a half-time employee, and at least to begin with, somewhat of usually a contractor. There's also idea B and maintenance of effort. So idea B, part B, mandates that state and local school agencies maintain their levels of financial support for special education and related services from year to year. On the state level and local level, targets known as maintenance of efforts, or MOE. So this is in statute 2286, which requires school districts and charter schools to report to the public education department annually on the program costs and planned expenditures for services for students with disabilities and for personnel providing ancillary and related services. So again, I strongly recommend that this be a report also to the board, so that the board has an understanding. And when the board has an understanding, that means the head administrator has an understanding of how your special education students' needs are being met. Then there are bilingual multicultural education units. So if your school is planning on having a bilingual multicultural educational program, you have to be approved by the PED's multilingual bureau for that program. And there's a variety of different types of programs, but it does have to be approved. So if you have a dual language type of course, or there's also like biliteracy certificates and things like that. So there's different levels, but if you get approved to provide that, the students in that program will be generating 0.5 additional units of the base unit value. So it's important to remember that in New Mexico, 18% of public students are identified as English language learners. That's substantially higher than the national average of 10%. Most of these students do not participate in bilingual programs. And most students in bilingual programs are not English learners. More than 400 schools offer programs in 9 languages, including American Sign Language, Spanish, and 7 indigenous languages. So one of the things that has happened historically is that students who are English language learners can be identified as a special needs student. Being someone who English is not your first language does not make you a special ed student. It makes you an English learner, but it doesn't necessarily make you a special ed student. They might have a special ed need as well, but that cannot be determined to be their lack of English. You can also have students who are gifted in English language learners. They are very underrepresented in gifted programs, again, because of a lack of understanding of the child's ability due to their language, their lack of English language knowledge. So again, I think it's important for reports to the board so that the school can be on top of how they're assessing all of their students every year, to be looking out for those students who are gifted, even if they are an English language learner, or need special educational services, including if they are an English language learner. And so, thinking about how you're going to provide those services to these students is critical. And how you're assessing them and what supports you're going to be providing. It's important for you to be aware of the Martinez and Yazzie consolidated lawsuit. So in the lawsuit, the first district court ruled that there were deficiencies in the education of at-risk students, including failing to provide culturally and linguistically responsive instruction. English learners scored lower than non-English learners in reading and math, and English learners generally take fewer advanced courses and have lower graduation rates. So again, thinking about, what are we going to do at our school to make sure that we're not falling into this, paradigm of our non-English speakers not advancing and not progressing as they should. So in 2021, the Legislative Finance Committee report found early studies indicate culturally and linguistically responsive education increased student engagement and outcomes. So many of you might be saying, well, what about the Trump administration and their pulling of DEI across the country? This is something that, the state has a lawsuit that we are beholden to, and the courts will have to decide which takes precedence. But for our application, you have to speak to this. You have to be aware of it, and you're asking to run a public school in the state of New Mexico, and we're asking, how are you going to do a better job than the schools that are already available? There's another additional fund that you can apply for, which is the Fine Arts Education Fund or Act. It's to encourage, it's for schools that are going to offer fine arts activities to elementary school students. So this is not just having an art class. This is a program that you're going to do in music, theater, dance, visual arts. You have to apply and you have to be approved. The funds, I think it generates, are 0.05. Physical education is listed on the 910B5. It isn't, I've never known of it to be funded, but it is on there. Hopefully you will be working with an established business manager on your financial plan. But again, you have to qualify for funding, but I've not been able to ever find out who you would qualify with. So, because I don't think there's any more funds.
Missy?
Yeah.
So when the schools or the applicants are completing the 910B5, physical education, the arts, I thought it was only elementary program, those are factors that increase the amount of the SEG. They're not it's not a separate, I think the elementary or the PE it's just a factor that adds into what the total SEG is, rather than a program like one of the
Okay.
programs where you write a grant, you get an amount, and that's for that.
Thanks. I've never gotten anybody to respond to me about that, and it doesn't look like that. So, but I appreciate that. That's good. What point can applicants apply for fine arts? Once you're approved and you're into your IY year, you would want to work on that, applying for the fine arts. Let's see. Okay, so it's more about physical education. Okay. So, oh, I didn't put titles on this slide. How weird is that? How is this even in my,
Says facilities timeline. Is this
yeah,
maybe a good time now that I do the quick whip around?
it is, because what happened to
Okay.
my correct slide?
Okay. All right. Well, so again, welcome to the training. Glad to see you all here. This means that you're still on track to submitting, but we want to hear a little bit more from you. So I just have the list of folks that submitted the notice of intent, and as I just go through, whoever is here representing that school, please unmute, say hello, let us know who's here with you. We want to know who your team is. If your team has grown since you submitted the notice of intent, that would be something that we would love to hear. And then, you know, Missy and I are getting ready to put out to the universe a call for peer reviewers who will read and rate your application. So it's always sort of tricky. How many will we have? And we don't always know. So I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being for sure, no doubt, 1 being, I'm going to hold off for this year. Where are you on deciding you want to submit your application to the Public Education Commission? And if you've decided you want to go with the local district, that would be also enormously helpful information for us to take into consideration. No pressure, you can change your mind later if you want, but we're just trying to gauge your current status. So again, as I read your school's name, unmute, maybe put your camera on, let us know who's here from this school. Let us know if you've added new people to your team and where you are with the potential to submit to the PEC. We'll start with Andalusia.
Hello, this is Radi Abul Hassan, and
Hi, Roddy.
I'm representing Andalusia. Yes, our team members have grown. We already added 3 more individuals in the team, with different promises of serving different roles in the future. We're still figuring out like whether they want to be on the board or they want to move into the management. That's kind of like one thing that we're discussing right now. We're still working on the master plan, but we're working on a Word document that I'm sharing with the other group, just answering the different questions. Um, I think we're pretty much I would say 9, like,
Okay,
9 out of 10.
awesome.
Like just giving one just for whatever circumstances that might come up, like saying, okay, we're really not gonna do it this year. But we definitely want to submit the application. It's gonna be through the local district.
Oh, through
Yeah.
APS.
Through
Okay.
APS, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Roddy.
Yeah.
And this is just a quick whip around again. Collins Lake.
Howdy, this is
Hi,
Steve.
Steve.
I've got Becky Kappas as well as on the call. Hi, Becky. I was not able to make it today. We are progressing fairly quickly. Oops, let me turn that off. Again, I'd say we probably, we are going to make this work. So we're either a 9 or a 10. We've got some work to do. We've been focusing this last couple of weeks on the facility management plan. We've got that pretty well wrapped up. I know there's some discussion as to whether it's due on the 1st of April or the 14th, but we're going to have it ready for the 1st. Our team's grown a little bit. We started with a pretty good sized group to start with. And then we are also in the process of actually looking to start recruiting for our head of school. So
Awesome.
things are going well.
Okay, thank you so much, Steve. Hi, Becky. Good to see you both here. Enchanted Valley Montessori.
Hi. So we're here. Our team is growing. We're in the same position as Roddy, just trying to figure out who wants to be a board member and who wants to be part of the actual school day-to-day things. I think for Enchanted Valley, it's a 9. We have a facility. We have a lot of support in the community. I mean, I think that's, unless something crazy happens, that's where we're at.
Okay, and then, and that is a 9 with the PEC, Angela?
Yeah, with the PEC.
Okay, great. Where's your facility?
It's going to be on the OK Wingate Pueblo.
Okay. All right, Las Cruces International STEAM.
Good morning, Ms. Karina. Good morning, everybody. We actually changed our name to Inspira STEAM Academy. So that's an update. I am here with Jessica Castro Huelna, and we have 5 folks on our team, and we are in line, and it'll be a 10. So we will be with the PEC.
Thank you. Good to see you, Julia. LePierre Montessori.
Yeah, hi, good morning. This is Julie. We also have Clarissa with me. I think we are
Hi.
at 8 right now. I reached out to a couple of people to be part of the board member and the school, but they haven't confirmed. Also, I think it was, I don't know if we're the only one that's going with the school district instead of the PEC. So that one, we're still,
You're debating?
yeah, whether to
Okay.
go through with PEC or not. So yeah, that's where
Okay. And what was your number?
8. Did I say 8? Oh,
I might not have heard you.
yeah,
Glad you're here.
thank you.
Llano Estacado. Llano Estacado. Is anybody here from that school? It's Clovis? No? Okay. Res Academy. Anyone here from Res Academy? No? And then Sundance Montessori.
Hi, it's me again. For Sundance, we're probably at an 8 because facilities is a little bit challenging. We have the people in place, and we're undecided at this point about going under the district or PEC because of facilities. So that's where we're at.
All right. Thank you, guys. Turn it back over to Missy.
All right, thank you. So now we're going to go over advice from one of our peers, and she can speak if she wants to, but I did not intend for her to present. She's been a business manager at charter schools in our state for a very long time, and contracts a lot with the public education with the charter schools division. So she's, the peer reviewers are very serious in their task of reading through your applications, and they dissect the financial and the board portions of the charter document, and they dissect the curriculum and academic part as well. The peer reviewers that we are lucky to get are all people who have either been a business manager at a charter school, a head administrator at a charter school, a teacher at a charter school. We get people with experience serving on the board, all to read and review your application. So it is imperative for the person who's writing the narrative and the person who is completing the SEG worksheets and the 5-year budget worksheets to make sure you're working together and talking to each other. It has appeared in the past that the narrative throughout the application and the budget don't match. And that's the type of thing they're looking for. It's the type of thing the commissioners will look for. The commissioners read the applications as well. The schools that were approved last year and are in their implementation year this year, in getting them ready for contract negotiations and writing out what their educational program is going to say in their contract, was difficult for some of our schools going through this year because they might have changed their plan a little bit. And the commission, you know, if you, what you say you're going to provide in this application, they will want to hold you to, if you get approved and enter into your IY year and then your contract negotiations. So what you put in this application is very important. And the reviewers are looking at the consistency throughout. And does the budget support what you're saying that you are going to do and provide? So making sure that those people who are working on those parts are really in close communication. And that's where other team members can be so valuable in doing a first read through to see if they can understand what it is that you're getting across, and whether or not it seems to make sense or contradict with what you've said in both your budget and in other parts of your application. So the peer reviewers have access to a lot of information. It's the same research information that you guys have. And so again, making sure that the statements that you're writing in your application are accurate, and that you present that information clearly and concisely. So if you, for example, if your charter document states that you're using Rio Rancho District's percentage of special education numbers, know that the peer reviewers are going to go and get those numbers and look at those numbers, right? So try to, make sure that if you're looking at Rio Rancho District's special education numbers from 2024, make sure that you're putting the, that resource. It's the 2024 number or the 2023 number, whatever, year it is, it's most accurate. If your narrative states that you will have 15% level C and D special ed students, be sure that the SEG worksheet has 15% C and D level students. Make sure ancillary numbers are reasonable. If you are stating that you're going to have 15% C and D special population students, and then budget for 5 full-time equivalent ancillary teachers, that's not reasonable, right? That's way more than you would need. When it comes to your membership, make sure that those numbers are reasonable. I know that business managers will start from, it's going to take this not many of dollars for you to run your school, so you need to put your enrollment at this number. But that number needs to be reasonable, or the work that you're going to do to make sure that you get that number needs to be reasonable, right? So if you are thinking that you're going to have 100 students, for example, you should have a really good, robust plan that you talk about how you're going to find those students, how you're going to actually get those students, because it is extremely rare. People who build good community support first, or during the whole process, are the ones who are more successful with getting the numbers that they actually say they're going to get. So in my experience since 2017, there's only been a few schools that got very close to their projected number. So we are seeing an overall decrease in student population across the state. So you also need to make sure that they're reasonable for the district in which you're going to be located. If you write something in your narrative about the budget, for example, we will spend $300,000 in salaries for teachers, be sure that you have $3,000 in your budget for teachers. Make sure that the staffing pattern in the charter narrative agrees to your budget. So again, if you're saying we're going to hire 10 regular ed teachers and 3 special ed teachers, make sure that your budget worksheet reflects that. Make sure that your salaries are reasonable. If you state $300,000 for salaries for 10 teachers, that averages to $30,000 per teacher and is not reasonable because you have to have the mandatory minimum salaries reflected. And then also be sure they're reflected in the teacher cost index for years 2 and 5, 2 through 5 of your 5-year budget plan. Make sure the staffing pattern in the charter narrative agrees to your budget. Oh, that's a duplication, sorry. The calendar. Your calendar will be scrutinized by the peer reviewers. It'll also be scrutinized by the commission, and if you get approved, it'll be scrutinized by the school budget people. So consider including the calculations you make for the total number of instructional hours, especially if not all the school days are identical in instructional hours. So in other words, you know, if you're saying you're going to have this many instructional hours, but your days aren't, you know, you don't have a 7-hour school day every day, 5 days a week. What formula did you use to come up with your instructional hours? That'll be helpful for the peer reviewers. The use of UCOA account codes. So UCOA stands for the Unified Code of Accounting, I believe. So it's easier for the reviewer if in your narrative you put the UCOA account code when they're mentioned. So for example, we will spend $100,000 for student computers. This is budgeted under, and then there's the UCOA account code. Remember, your expenditures cannot exceed your revenue, and you cannot use prior year carryover cash for recurring expenditures. So if you are going to use carryover cash in the subsequent year, it needs to be for a one-time expenditure, and it should be addressed in the narrative. Using the $100,000 computer example, the narrative should state something like, this purchase will be a one-time purchase and the school plans to use carryover cash for this purchase. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that, Betty?
Excuse me. No, I think we're good.
Okay.
So far on this slide.
Because I'm about to go into strong internal controls. So this isn't just Betty, this is also me. Your application needs to include strong internal controls addressing all accounting, financial, and human resources tasks. Please read through statute and regulation for addressing internal controls to be sure that your controls are strong. So it's not just, you know, internal controls are how are you going to make sure you're not making errors, particularly with your money. And so internal controls are policies and procedures of what your school is going to do to ensure that the money that flows through your school is spent appropriately. you have to also monitor those policies and procedures to make sure that they work. And that is the task of the finance committee of the board. And they need, so it's not just we're going to have financial internal control policies and procedures, including having a segregation of duties, checking to make sure that cash is deposited following the 24-hour rule, things like that. How is the finance committee of the board going to be monitoring the internal controls to make sure that they are functioning and happening? That's the role of the finance committee. How often are they going to do that? And how are they going to report that out to the full board in an open meeting? That's all of it is strong internal controls. It's not enough to just have the policy or the procedure. There has to be the monitoring of it as well. You need to have strong bylaws. Your bylaws, people really need to understand that bylaws are your guidebook, your rule book, and your protection. But you're going to be checked to make sure that you're following your bylaws. So you're the ones who have dominion over what you put in your bylaws, but other people, including yourselves, are holding you to task to make sure that you're following your own bylaws. And it's something that we've seen as schools age and mature, they might get a finding that in their audit because they didn't follow their bylaws. Their bylaws stated that they would annually evaluate their head administrator. And then, 10 years down the road, a new board, a new head administrator, and that board forgets that task. And they forget to do it. That's the type of thing you don't want. And should you become approved, you will be required to create an annual board calendar that lists out those types of activities so that they don't get lost when you have change in board members and change in head administrators. But a plan, so having an understanding that your bylaws, they guide the board and the school and what they are supposed to be doing. They protect and support you. When you have a clause in your bylaws that say like how to remove a board member, you follow those steps and you've protected the schools from any action from a disgruntled board member. So there's a lot of things, but the bylaws that you have when you first open up, might shift and change and grow over time. So thinking about the board's role in ensuring that the bylaws are still meeting the needs of the school throughout the school's life, and that the board is aware and focused on needing to make sure that they follow their own bylaws, that they're aware of what their own bylaws say. Chat. Do we have a Word copy of the Roddy, I will I thought that I sent you a Word copy of the PSFA master plan form. But if I didn't, I will send that out to everybody again.
Missy, can I say something about the
Yeah.
internal controls when you take a break from?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So on the internal controls, I just want to kind of give an example. I knew of a school that their internal control for everything that they did, their internal controls was one statement. And it said, we will do what the Charter Schools Division and the Public Education Division tell us to do with regards to whatever. And that is not a policy, that is not a procedure, that's not an internal control. Your internal controls have to have like a policy that says, this is, we will have a strong oversight of our cash disbursements procedures. And then your procedure is how you're going to go about doing that. So you can't just say, we're going to do what we're told, and really a strong policy and procedure really goes beyond the basics. There are the basics everybody should follow, but if you can put in stronger controls, that's even better. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. And that melds very beautifully with what I want to say about strong bylaws. So a lot of schools have, Steve, what do you
Go
have a
ahead.
question about bylaws? I mean, about internal controls. I'll let you go
No,
first.
I was just kind of following up on Ratty comment or question. We have received, I think from you, something called the PSFA Applicant Charter FMP Ed Specs for 2024 or something, which is what we're using, but I've also seen other kind of formats that are a little different. And I want to make sure we're using the right things.
Okay. I think you should use what I sent.
Okay, I think this is what you sent, but sometimes it gets so confusing.
Okay.
They'd authorize charter school applicant facilities master plan, educational spec
Yeah.
checklist.
Yeah.
And then it's yellow highlight. Please note this checklist only applies to those charter schools applying for approval.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're using the right thing.
All right. All right. And in answer to your bylaws question, you could say that they need to be updated every 10 years. I think it's appropriate for a board to review them, review their bylaws every year annually, just like let's in one of your meetings, just, set the task that everybody reads through the bylaws. And at the meeting, does anybody have any questions, concerns, changes, additions, subtractions that they want to propose? So we've recently, the Public Education Commission has asked charter schools to add a clause to their bylaws. So all of our schools, all 60 of them, have been sending us their updated bylaws, and I've been reading through them, and the majority of them have a statement in their bylaws like this, in which they recognize that they will follow New Mexico statutes and rules that are applicable to public charter schools, and that each member commits to take necessary steps to become familiar with these provisions, as well as other provisions of applicable laws and rules. And then they list out all these statute and Title VI of code. But I would say, and this would be something to go along with a regular annual review of your bylaws to make sure that you actually understand what you're saying you understand. These codes and acts and titles are big things. Title VI has 102 chapters in it. So what exactly in Title VI of NMAC is your school going to ensure that they follow? How are they going to ensure that they're following it? Do all 102 chapters apply to your school? Probably not. Some of them are reserved, but I wasn't going to count out those, which means that they don't really have anything in them written in. But there's other things that might only apply to a high school, and you don't have a high school, and such like that. But how will you be aware as a board? How will your board be aware of what is in Title VI or what is in other statutes to be ensuring that they are following them. And how might your school know what parts of Title VI NMAC your authorizer is going to be evaluating you on and checking you on? So those are important things for you guys to understand. You know, anybody who is saying to us, Charter Schools Division, when we say, hey, you know, we are monitoring for this and we don't see you doing this, I've had board members go, what are you talking about? We don't have to do that. Well, it's in Title VI. And guess what? In your bylaws, you say we're following what it says we're going to follow in Title VI. So basically, this is a long way of saying, don't just say we're going to follow statute, we're going to follow regulation. How? How is it going to live in your school? How is it going to be a living and breathing activity at your school that you are following these requirements? How does the board ensure it? How does the head administrator report out on it? How does a business manager report out on it? How is it tracked? How do you know? You also need to understand licensure requirements. What positions require PED licensure and what is required to obtain that licensure? So for example, your head administrator, your executive director needs to have a level 3B administrator's license. An ancillary service provider needs a New Mexico Board and Regulations license for their specialty as well as PED licensure. So there are a lot of requirements for different teachers under licensure. All right, so any questions about the advice from up here?
I'll jump in and, as we're going through this, obviously we don't have to reinvent the wheel on all the bylaws. There's probably some good examples out there. And we just want to make sure we're including everything we need. The other question I've got on the board is, do we need to have all board members identified at the time we put our application in? And then a corollary to that is that we've been thinking that we really want to have staggered terms on our board members. Does that make sense? Where maybe your first, we're thinking 5 board members to start with, and that they stagger that one's for 1 year, 2 or 3, up to 5 years, and then every year you're either reconfirming one of the board members or adding a new one or replacing one.
So a lot of people do stagger. My question is, how are you going to track it? How are you going to ensure it? Because right now we don't, and I hope to God we never have to, because Lord, that's a lot. I personally wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it if it was me. It's hard to find board members. If it was me, I would put limits on board officer terms, but not on board membership. And I'll give you a couple examples. We've got one school that 4 or 5 years ago, when they were being renewed, they were actually in violation of their bylaws because they had term limits for their board members and board officers, and their board officers were beyond their term limits, so they were already in violation of their bylaws. The commission voted to not renew them, not because of the bylaws, but for other reasons, but that was just an extra thing that they were doing. And the school was fighting for their life to not be closed down. And I can see where a school in that circumstance would want to stick with the same leadership, but that made them in violation of their bylaws. Now, it's a relatively easy fix. You just have to change your bylaws if you don't want to follow what they say anymore. if you change your bylaws, you have to notify your authorizer and we have to see the change that you're making. So you can't say things like, we're never going to meet and we're going to have, 3 members. But you can make that change of, we're not going to have term limits. So if you have term limits, the auditor might decide to do an audit of that and say, okay, you've got term limits. Where's your information showing, how long this person's served on the board, and should they come off now? Having people come off the board because of a term limit. Another school has recently done that, and that dropped them to 3 board members, which got them into more trouble than having somebody overstay the amount of time that they were supposed to. So it is where you have autonomy to make the choice, but do not put anything into anything that you don't have a plan for how you're going to track it, would be my advice. And so if you want to track term limits, great. But, how are you going to make sure that that's, what is it getting for you? Is it, do you feel like that's going to make people say, oh, okay, I'll join because I'll only be on for 3 years? Or, it just becomes, there's not a lot of boards who want to track that for themselves. The head administrator ends up tracking all of that type of thing. And, we'll know because you have to turn paperwork in for all of your board members. So we'll know when they started and we'll know if they've gone over, but it's not our job to tell you, hey, this person's reaching close to their term limit, right? Because we've got 60 plus schools. We don't have that information on the top of our head, but we can get to it if somebody else says, hey, has this person gone over their term limit? So anyway, it's an awful lot to track. But it's
Missy?
up to you. Yeah.
Can I also offer a response?
Of course.
So first of all, Steve, great question. That means you're thinking deeply about how you're going to structure your governing body. And you asked, do you need to have all governing members in place? And there's 3 sections, at least 3. No, there's more than 3 sections in the organizational framework where it's asking questions about the governing body. It wants to know the structure, and it wants to know the qualifications, and it wants to know who is on the board. I think staggered terms work because I work with a board that does have staggered terms in terms of the PEC, right? And like, there's not a period of time when all members of the PEC are off. They turn over with some continuity, and continuity is a good thing. What we've seen over the years is some people have brought on board members that maybe are committing for a certain amount of time in the beginning years just to get you started and open. And that might be an initial way to say, okay, when you're listing out in the application who your board members are, here's this person who will be on for 2 years. Here's this person who will be on for 4. That way it's clear how you're staggering and who is committed to help you in the long haul versus help you get up and started.
So the other thing I was thinking on that is, and again, we were thinking about 5 board members. We were thinking about 5-year terms with the ability to add where you can sign up for another year or another term. So it's not like you can only do 5 years and then you're gone forever. So that if you had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year terms, next year the person that had the 1-year term has we're going to either replace them or sign them up for another 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, we have some charter schools that have board members that started with the school. So, and there is something to be said for continuity, and of the volunteers who hold a lot of responsibility over the school. So, I'm trying to think of a time when somebody served too long on a board, and I'm sure there's an example out there. But for the most part, I think that what I've seen, I can't remember, there was a school up for renewal and they had like a perfect financial ratings on all the years of the charter term, like everything was perfect. And this person was on the board of a school and had been on the board of the school for a long time and made sure that audit and finance committee were meeting. And, you know, we asked, what's the secret to your success? Well, he had the knowledge, skills, and he also had a lot of time with that school. He was deeply committed, and it showed in the performance of that school. So there's a lot to be said for super committed board members.
Well, and my understanding is that if you're gonna, if the existing board members choose the next one. So what I liked about the idea is that if you've got someone, you know, that they sign up, you've appointed them for a 5-year term. At the end of the 5 years, if they're doing a great job and you want them, the other 4 members say, yeah, we'd like to invite you to be on the board for another 5 years. But it also kind of gives someone, you know, an off ramp if they say, hey, I've done my 5 years, or that, you know, they haven't done a great job in 5 years and you don't want to reappoint them.
Yeah,
Just
and
kind
what's
of bring some new
important
blood.
to us is what Missy said, that whatever you are putting in your plans, your bylaws, we can then see how that's being implemented. It's clear because they're clearly written, but then when you're up and operating, the site visit team or whoever is looking at, did they do what they said they were going to do? That they can see evidence of that.
Is it also possible to have the board members sign up for an indefinite term where you're a board member until you're replaced?
That's how a lot of them are, right, Missy?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
And we've got one school that has, if you were a founding board member, your term is unlimited, but if you join afterwards, you have a limit. And again, like, oof, I wouldn't want to be, you know, I'm faced with the reality that a lot of head administrators are telling me like their board secretary won't take the minutes. The head administrator has to do it, or they have to find a staff member to do it. So like if your board secretary isn't really going to be willing to take the minutes and do what the secretary's role is and job is, then how is that person going to also be tracking, you know, terms and things like that? So it's you, whatever you decide, what's your plan to ensure
Gotta
that the
follow it.
work will get done?
And
It's
that
not
there's
just,
high quality, yes, like
Yeah,
you were
high
saying,
quality.
because you know, so your bylaws should talk about how members are removed from the board. Not
Yes.
just how they are brought on, but how they get off the board. And so a charter school, if we see a charter school remove a board member because they're not attending any of the minutes, if that's in their bylaws, then they're doing their work. We can't control everybody. We're not going to know how everybody's going to behave. And that's why you put into your policies and your plans, structures and systems that will lead towards high quality governance and high quality school operations.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. Like I said, I've been on a lot of boards and you've got some members that you can't get rid of. You've got other people, other boards that you want to keep someone, but they don't have the ability. They've got term limits and you're losing good people because of it. You know, there's a lot of different factors in there.
A lot of scenarios. And, you know, don't also, so we do, I mean, and Karina answered that question, I was getting to it. You do have to say who is on the board. That can change from the time you submit your application to the time you're entering into your implementation year, which is fine. It's happened before. So it's not like, you know, we're going to hunt these people down and tag them or something. But it's, you know, it speaks to your ability to do the work. So
Yeah, no, and again, I think that we've got some folks in mind, and we've got some qualities we're looking for, and there may be 2 or 3 people we're thinking of for one of the board positions, and they haven't committed yet or whatever.
right. So it just, there's so many things that you all are having to think about and plan for. And, you know, you're going to be thinking kind of like best case scenario, but you also need to be setting into place mechanisms for making sure that this myriad of things are going to be able to get done, be like clockwork and be consistent. And, you know, how is it, and how is it going to be specific to your school? You said, you know, I'm sure there's lots of examples of good bylaws. There are, but you know, you want to make sure that you're using those just as examples, and it's what it's going to be at your school, that you're not just adopting something like, we're going to follow Title VI. Okay, that's awesome but like, are you aware of everything that's in these different laws and regulations, and how are you going to make sure that it's done? So
Yeah, no, I think on the bylaws, it's good to have a starting point, but then you go through them one by one and say, okay, that applies to us, this one doesn't.
right.
Let's take that one out,
Yeah.
because but we don't have to start from, okay, what should we have in a bylaw?
Right, exactly. Yeah. All right. So the academic framework, we have A through I in indicators that we're going to go through. Remember the rubric? There's a rubric that states what is expected for you to be able to achieve a meets the criteria versus an approaches the criteria versus a does not meet the criteria rating. I'm not going to read through these. They're in the application, and you'll have a copy of this. Your mission must identify how you're going to achieve your mission. Discuss the importance of the mission to your proposed community. It has to be clear, concise, innovative, and measurable. You have to discuss what mission success looks like at the student level. How do you know, what's the hope and dream that you, this founding team, want every student to have access to throughout their tenure at your school or perpetuity? You know, you're proposing an institution that should outlive you and the rest of the founders. And so how are you preparing that? Now, people can change missions. They can do that throughout the life of a charter. It's rare, and I don't think people could, you know, I think it'd be tough call to be like, we're gonna go from, you know, being our mission being, you know, to prepare students in IB to preparing students, I don't know, for career technical. Like, that's going to be a big shift. So, Valerie?
Hi. Sorry, I
Hi.
just wanted to give some quick advice. An applicant from last year in their mission had said that the students were going to dream audaciously, I think was the verbiage. And if that's in your mission, how would you measure that? How do you measure if somebody can dream audaciously? So just some advice when you're writing your mission, although you want it fluffy and good feeling, you also want to make sure that you're able to provide or assign a metric to whatever it is you're saying in your mission.
Absolutely, because you're gonna have a metric, whether you want it or not. So you also have a vision statement. Now the vision statement is not rated as meeting, not meeting. It's only rated for did you provide it or not. So it's there or it's not there. That's not rated for its essence, what's in it. But it's where the commission wants you to talk about, you know, why you're committed to this heavy lift of opening up a public school. So, you know, what's driving you to provide this for your community? And how does your team intend to interact with your proposed community in order to provide their children with better academic outcomes? And what about your proposed program serves the proposed community in unique and innovative ways? So we're not rating the substance of this, but we're rating that you have it. Uniqueness and innovation. So what's unique, what's innovative, what significant contribution of your educational program that you're intending to provide, you know, to the New Mexico public education environment? What are the needs of the community that you're planning on locating in? You have to demonstrate how your team knows there is a compelling demand for your proposed school's educational program in the area. You have to ensure that the evidence establishes a compelling demand for the proposed school's educational program based on reliable research, effective practices, or demonstrated success in schools with diverse characteristics. So here's the measurable part for your mission. You have to propose 2 potential mission-specific goals. They have to align to the student outcomes identified in your mission response to in the first indicator. It needs to be guided by the elements of the SMART format. It needs to include measures and metrics, and how the board of the proposed school intends to regularly monitor equitable mission success. So yes, if you have something very esoteric, like we are going to have lifelong learners, you need to say how you're going to measure that. Now, if your mission is to produce students who are ready for college or achieving academically, that's great, but you need to have a different measure, a way of measuring academic achievement and or growth that is different enough from how you're going to be evaluated on the statewide academic assessment. So it's not advisable to have an academic achievement goal like our kids are going to exceed on NWEA maps. Like that's already going to be captured, data like that's already going to be captured through the statewide assessment. And so they want the mission goal, and you really want your mission goal to be a supportive data point for why your school should be allowed to continue to exist that is auxiliary to or augmenting the statewide assessment. So, you're going to have that academic evaluation through the statewide assessment. Think about your mission goal in a way that's going to be different information that will hopefully bolster the academic data. So like, you might not be achieving exactly the level of academic achievement that you think you're going to achieve. And your mission goal can support that, that you are really providing something good for your students in a different way. So a lot of our schools that have just recently gone through renewal have an academic mission have really had to look at kind of more social emotional aspects of their mission statement, to try to get measurements out of what they're doing. So just your mission goal should be something that can help emphasize the reason why your school should continue to exist when you get renewed every 5 years. I thought of something else, but I just lost it. So, yes, the mission goals used to be, well, mission goals now have to cover every student. So this isn't just measuring a grade. This is measuring all of the students at your school and reporting out on that annually to your authorizer. So that's another thing to consider in the measurement. It's something that needs to be measured within each academic year and reported out to the Charter Schools Division. So curriculum, educational program, student performance standards. You have to describe your proposed school's curriculum, including research-based evidence that supports the effectiveness of the selected model and the target population. So again, the target population is an important words in that statement. It's not just, this is why Montessori or STEAM is an excellent pedagogy. It's how your target population is going to be benefiting from this model. Describe how the proposed school's curriculum will meet the requirements of equity for all underserved populations. Identify information that demonstrates how the curriculum will align with New Mexico Common Core state standards and New Mexico content standards. Identify information that demonstrates how the curriculum will align with the proposed school's mission and include a reasonable, as based on the professional judgment of experienced educators, timeline and plan for the development of the entire proposed curriculum, including scope and sequence, unit plans, daily lesson plans, project plans, and rubrics, and unit and course assessments. Keep in mind that what you write in here will be what we're working with when we're building the educational program that will be in your contract if you are approved. And so what that means is we're going to take what you write in this section and have a conversation about, okay, so Charter Schools Division is coming into your school to do an observation. How are they going to be able to ensure that your outdoor educational program is happening? What's the evidence that they're going to see? And so again, like, if you're going to put in here that your kids are going to have internships with area businesses and you list those businesses out, you'd better be pretty confident about it because the commission is going to expect that you're going to have partnerships with those entities. So just, you can't put things in this section and then be like, actually, we realize now that we can't provide that. That's going to be a problem for the commission if you try to have conversations like that. Yes, Roddy, what's your question?
For our school, the innovation or the curriculum is a big part of the innovation. And my question here is, do we have to have like textbooks For example, like we're trying to look into New Mexico history connected to some part of the international history as well, and the geography and architecture and all of those ones. The curriculum itself does not exist, so there's no textbook available that brings all of these things together. So do we need to create textbooks, or we can just put the framework for the curriculum and then the PD and the trainings and the resources will be developed as doing like the planning year, or probably doing the first year of like instruction?
Right. So yeah, you can create the curriculum that you're providing, and what you'll want to talk about then is what your plan would be once you would be approved to develop that curriculum. So you have to have your curriculum has to be fully developed, whether you're using the high quality instructional materials identified by the public education department, or you're developing your own curriculum. You have to have a very clear plan on what that pathway is. So like, what's the pathway to purchasing the curriculum, or what's the pathway to developing that curriculum? And that has to be developed and ready to go on day one of your school. So, you know, who are the people that are going to be responsible? What's the timeline? You know, so you have to think through that plan at this stage, you know, because it would have to be all developed before you open your school to students.
And does curriculum mean textbooks, or it doesn't have to be?
No, it doesn't have to be a textbook, but it has to be, I mean, you would presumably be creating a curriculum that all of the teachers would be using, not just expecting each teacher to create a curriculum, right? So you would be, you know, overall creating a curriculum that this school would be using. So that curriculum would not have to take a book form, but it would have to take some type of form. It would have to have some type of materials for teachers to teach from. Anybody else want to say anything? Greg, Karina, about curriculum?
Just that, you know, I would spend a lot of time on the PED's website to see what sort of resources and requirements are listed. I know that just from someone who's worked in charter schools over the years, like 20 years, I've seen a real increase in the amount of attention that's being paid to curriculum, high quality instructional materials, teacher training, and a lot more resources and guidance around everything from science teaching to reading teaching. And so please use PED as a resource and see what other bureaus and divisions are saying on their specific work pages or web pages.
Thank you. So bilingual multicultural education is going to be on multiple slides because there's a lot in there. So I hope the breakdown makes sense to you in this way. So a complete response must ensure equal educational opportunities for students in New Mexico by addressing the goals of the Bilingual Multicultural Education Act, including providing students with opportunities to expand their conceptual and linguistic abilities and potentials in a successful and positive manner, teaching students to appreciate the value and beauty of different languages and cultures, and meeting state academic content standards and benchmarks in all subject areas. Continuing on with this indicator, then you will talk about Indian education. ensuring equitable and culturally relevant learning environments and culturally relevant instructional materials for American Indian students, providing for the study, development, and implementation of educational systems that affect the educational success of American Indian students, to close the achievement gap and increase graduation rates, encouraging and fostering parental involvement in the education of their children, and providing mechanisms to improve educational opportunities for Native American students for the purpose of closing the achievement gap, increasing graduation rates, and increasing post-secondary enrollment and retention and completion, and continuing on with Hispanic education. The same thing as Indian education, but for Hispanic students. So I'm not going to read it all out. Except for initiate and organize an equity council composed of multiple school stakeholders with the intent to create more equitable learning opportunities for marginalized students. Continuing on with this indicator, addressing the Black Education Act, which means developing and including anti-racism policies, developing curricula and instructional materials that recognize and teach Black culture and anti-racism, implementing anti-racism training for teachers and staff, and opportunities to explore one's identity and societal systems that may impact their identity and future. And so I'm going to go back a couple slides here because, again, I want to highlight this is very appropriate to build at this point. How is this going to be reported out to the board? This is the type of report that the board should be getting. What Indian students do we have? How are we serving our Native population? How are we serving our Hispanic population students? How are we serving our Black education students? How are we serving our general education students? How are we serving our special ed students? Like, those are subgroups of students, and the board should be understanding and getting reports annually on what the school is doing to close those gaps. So first of all, you need to know, like, what is the gap? Where are the gaps? Do our Native American students have gaps? Are they performing at the same level as our general education students? Are they achieving above? Are they gifted? Are they below? What are we doing? What are we, the adults, doing to work to close those gaps for any subgroup? You know, your school, it might be your low income students, and it might be your girls. It might be, you know, some group that you can identify. So the next one is all of those together, the bilingual multicultural education, Indian education, Hispanic education, and Black education equity plan. So you will have to, all schools in our state have to have an equity council. It will have to be comprised of a direct reflection of your student population. So you can't say right now who would be on your equity council because you don't have students yet and you don't know the breakdown of the students you have. Do you have 25% Hispanic students and 50% low income students and 5% Native students and 2% Black students? You know, your equity council membership should be 25% Hispanic, 50% of them should be representing low income, 2% of them should be representing Black education, and I can't remember, 5% Native American. So that's, you know, something that you will have to have. What you really want to be talking about here is that you're aware of what your plan needs to be, but how are you going to recruit? How are you going to vet? Whose job is it? How are you going to ensure that the equity council is doing the work that they're going to do? And how are you going to ensure that the board is getting those reports, right? So how does the board interact with your equity council? What's that plan? Graduation requirements. So if you're not going to have a 12th grade, you don't have to have you don't have to respond to this. If there's anything that you don't have to respond to, you could just put not applicable, or you could put, we are an elementary school, so we don't have graduation requirements. I do think that if you're going to be a high school and you are, I don't think this, so if you're going to be a high school and you're going to ultimately have 12th graders, you do need to answer this question, even if you're not going to start out with 12th graders. But the things that this public education department and the authorizer really want, they don't want to be last in the country anymore. And they want you to be producing excellent outcomes for students. They only want to approve schools that are going to be getting excellent outcomes for students. And so thinking about everybody who has high school kids, tell me, we get kids in a 9th grade and they're reading at 2nd grade level. They could do math at a 1st grade level. So how are you going to get a student like that up to proficiency and graduating? The next indicator is teaching and instruction philosophy. So this is where you're describing the teaching and instructional philosophy of your proposed schools. Identify the primary instructional methods to be implemented that ensure equity and that align to the philosophy. Identify information that demonstrates the instructional methods are research-based, and describe how the educational philosophy and instructional methods support and align to the mission and curriculum, and how it's best supportive of the population you intend to serve. So again, I think, the commissioners, you don't need to spend so much time lauding the what makes your pedagogy that you're choosing so amazing. But how will it come alive for the students that you're hoping to serve? I think is like, what's it going to look like at your school is equally important. The next is your yearly calendar. You have to include a yearly calendar that identifies your start date, your end date, professional development days and times for your teachers, when you're going to have school-wide assessment periods, what are school days, what are holidays, what are partial days, and teacher-parent conferences. You also have to have a daily schedule that identifies instructional times, break times, start and end times, and the differences in the daily schedule for full and partial days. So now the peers are going to be putting on their imagination caps and imagining that they're a student at your school when they read your daily schedule. So, think about this from the standpoint of your future students and what it looks like to them. And I think that'll help you write a good daily schedule. So then we have the yearly calendar and daily schedule. You have to meet the minimum total instructional hours that are laid out in statute. Describe how the calendar and schedule support your educational program. Describe how the calendar and schedule are optimal for achieving high outcomes for your anticipated student population. Describe the extended learning time programs to improve academic success for students and professional learning of teachers. If you're an elementary school and you're participating in the K5+ or extended learning program, describe those and provide your calendar for year 2 and be supported by your budget. and describe how the proposed calendar supports the values of the community it intends to serve. So like, for example, if you were going to be proposing to open in an area where near a tribe or on tribal land, like, have you taken into consideration the tribal entities ceremonial schedule and holiday schedule and things like that? So next is how instruction will be effective for the student population. So, you know, what's your anticipated student population, including demographic information and educational proficiency based on enrollment at the school, attendance and truancy trends, English language proficiency, diverse populations, at-risk populations, and special ed needs. What factors influencing the makeup of your anticipated students? How is the educational philosophy designed to meet their needs? How is the instructional method designed to meet the needs of your students, particularly your at-risk ones? How your yearly calendar and daily schedule have been designed to meet their needs? And then that's second sentence there. The last sentence was duplicative. Next one is instructional services and supports for students with IEPs. You need to describe how you will identify and provide those supports to students who have IEPs. And like I said, you will have students who come to you with an existing IEP, and you will have students who your teachers will say, we need to have this child evaluated to see if they need an IEP. And so how are you going to be dealing with all of that? You have to describe, so this is a continuation, how you will ensure that students who are English language learners are not over-identified as students with disabilities. Identify specific responsibilities for school staff, classroom teachers, and special education staff, and identify specific training and support that will be provided to teachers and school staff to ensure they are able to fulfill their responsibilities. Continuing on, describe the timelines, benchmarks, and people responsible for developing discipline policies and protocols for your special populations. Capacity of the school district in the geographic boundaries of the proposed school, and provide special education services and FAPE. Process for tracking this protected population's progress and services, and how that will be reported to the board. The next one is monitoring and evaluation of special education students. So again, you know, what's your proposed plan for monitoring the progress towards special education students' attainment of their IEP goals? Identify specific responsibilities for school staff, classroom teachers, special education staff, including when and who will be reporting on progress towards goals. So now obviously you don't have names and of people, but you're thinking of positions, right? Identify the regular intervals at which progress will be monitored and success will be evaluated. And I don't need to read through every single one of these. Then we have required curriculum and instruction supports for English language learners. It's important for you all to know that when you have English language learners, there's identifying them, making sure that you understand how you can do that and how often that can happen. And so your English language learners students need to be part of your general education students, but they're receiving additional services to gain academic English. And then once they achieve proficiency, you have to continue to monitor them for 2 years to make sure that they don't lose any of their proficiency in academic English over that time period. So again, you know, how you do that, how it's going to be reported out to the board. Monitoring and evaluation of English learners. Describe how you're going to monitor the progress of the English language learners. Identify teachers, classroom staff, regular intervals at which progress will be monitored, action steps, reporting that will engage students and or families. Describe how the school will evaluate the effectiveness of its English language program and services. So again, thinking about, you know, you need all of your kids to progress through to get to proficiency with academic English. You should have an expectation of how long that's going to take, right? And it's going to vary child to child, but like you should have in mind like what that's going to look like at your school. Your plan to adhere to ESSA and state statutes. So how are you going to develop your educational framework to address the educational needs of Native American, Hispanic, Black, bilingual, multicultural students within a culturally and linguistically responsive approach to learning? Identify specific responsibilities, demonstrate rigor. Again, I'm not going to read through all of this because we're going to hear from PCS&M soon. You have to have your assessment plan. So how are you going to be building the assessment calendar into your calendar? And then your plan for the assessment, your data, assessing your assessment plan. So your analysis of your data, who's doing the analysis, or is each of your teachers going to be analyzing their information? How does the school do this overall to see that the kids are making progress, and where the teachers need to make improvements into how they're teaching their kids to make sure that more children are understanding everything that they need to understand. Plan for student progress and achievement and communication plan. So once you've analyzed that data, then how do you communicate that out? How do you communicate that to the students, the parents, the governing body, your authorizer, the broader community? This one has an appendices. Identify your communication plan for each of the specific sources of student achievement data in, oh no, that's H1 is the previous indicator. Sorry about that. So I don't believe any of you are replicating. So thank God we could just, and yes, I am. So I do need to know who everybody is. So I don't know who J is, just the letter J. I'm going to send this out to everybody.
Sorry,
I have.
it's Julie. I'm
Julie,
sorry.
okay, great. So I will be sending this out to everybody, Julie,
Thank you.
that I've got emails for. So, you know, just because you're proposing a Montessori doesn't mean you're replicating, right? This is if you were, you liked what Albuquerque Sign Language Academy is doing and you're going to replicate their model. So I don't think any of you raised to that level, which is great, because then we could just skim past that and ignore it. And that's perfect because it's just about 11 and hopefully Chris Narkin is here. I don't see him.
He is not, but I can
Okay.
take over for him.
Great. So
Morning, everybody. You guys look so excited and happy. Clarissa, it's probably midnight over there, 1 o'clock in the morning. Poor thing. All right, I just need to confirm that you all can see the presentation.
yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the Charter School Program Grant. We are about to launch our round 3 application. April 2nd is the mandatory meeting to attend just to gather some more information and express your interest in applying for the grant. So the executive director, Matt Paul, he is the overseer of this grant. So his name is on the federal grant. He's the one that approves everything. And Chris is the grant manager. I'm the deputy director to help with the grant. And we just hired a brand new fiscal coordinator. Her name is Christine Wilkins, and she is amazing. And she's the one that does all of the requests for reimbursement. So she spits out the money. Very quickly, just some introductions. We don't have to go through that. I think you all introduced yourselves already. Hello to the PED Charter School Division team. It's great to see you all. And we'll just go over the objectives, the eligibility, the application process, the funding, what's allowable and not allowable, which is probably the most important part. And then how you will actually apply, because the timeline is a little bit different for you all since you are not technically approved yet as a charter when the application window opens. So I'll go through those little details here in a little bit. Again, the personnel for the Public Charter Schools of New Mexico Charter School Program Grant is Matt Paul as the executive director, myself, Chris Narkin, and Christine Wilkins. And we do have other staff members on PCS&M, but the four of us are the ones that oversee the CSP grant. In 2023, the U.S. Department of Education awarded $235.8 million for the charter school program, of which $52.8 million was awarded to PCS&M over the 5 years of the grant in order to distribute 28 awards, sub-awards. We would like to say that it's not just money that is unrestricted. It is federal money, so it does have a lot of restrictions behind it and what's allowable and unallowable. So we have to follow whichever federal guidelines are with those funds attached with them. Our grant objectives align with the federal grant objectives for the charter school program. Our first objective is to expand access to high quality public school seats across New Mexico. So as Missy was mentioning, the commissioners want to make sure that they are approving high quality schools, that we have high performing schools. And we want to also support that in the expansion, replication, and opening of new charters that are high quality. And by high quality, we do look at academic achievement. So looking at the VISTA scores and making sure that our charter schools are performing and making sure that kids are achieving academically. So we want to expand the access to the seats by awarding the 28 subgrants and reaching our target of 7,500 new seats in those high quality schools. Our second grant objective is to improve the learning outcomes for high need students. We want to make sure that that academic achievement is achieved by all students, including those that are at risk or high need. And our third objective is to strengthen the overall charter sector in New Mexico. So that is just the sector as a whole across New Mexico, not just those that are awarded our subgrants. We also have a lot of opportunities to provide some support for the entire sector across New Mexico, which could include trainings, conferences, convenings, any technical assistance opportunities that we could provide to everybody that is involved with charter schools, not just the charter schools themselves, but the charter school division, our authorizers, as well as some other organizations that help support the charters. As new charter schools, you are an eligible applicant for this round, and I'll go into how many rounds or how many subgrant awards we are going to be able to offer this round. So new schools are able to apply for the charter school program grant if they apply to an authorized public chartering authority. So yes, that includes APS or any local district, as well as the Public Education Commission, and that you are approved. So you do have to go through the entire process and be approved before you could actually apply for the grant, or not apply for the grant, but receive the grant and go through the peer review process. and as well as providing adequate and timely notice to that authorizer, which I believe everybody on this call has. So for the new school applicants, and this will be changed to April of 2025, because we are going to offer that in April. Initially it was March, but we'll do this in April now. I think it was April 2nd is what I had said. And the new schools, the phase 1 webinar, which we'll send, and I think you should have received already an email. If you all would check your email for me, you should have received a notification from Chris Narkun, Narkun, and he sent out a calendar invite. Please let me know if you did not receive that calendar invite, notifying that we are going to have that mandatory webinar phase 1, just for you to show interest and gather some more information. Fill out a form for us saying that you are interested in applying for the grant this cycle. Again, if you didn't receive that email from Chris Narkun, it came out this morning, then let me know and I will make sure that that gets sent to you all. That'll be April 2nd. And it's not a very long meeting, so it won't take very long. And then for phase 2, that's the full application process. So that's really the meat and potatoes. That'll happen from June to August. The timeline is you'll submit your application to your authorizer in June, and then you'll have from June to August to go into our platform, fill out the application. A lot of it will be copy paste from your application to your authorizer, because it's going to ask about your mission and your vision and your goals. What will be added to it is a little more information about the budget though. So how would you plan to use the CSP funds in order for your planning year and your implementation year of your new charter? So it's not just a clear copy paste from your current application. There is a little bit more work involved, because we are going to ask for some narrative of your budget that aligns to that and how you would use the $2 million that we're offering. There is a competitive preference priority if you are planning on opening a school in a community that has a small significant charter presence. And by that, I mean that less than 5% of that community's students attend a charter school. So if less than 5% of the student population in your district attends a charter school, then you would receive some priority points if you do get approved. The capacity interview, there was some confusion last year that the applicants were confusing the charter schools division capacity interview with our capacity interview. So they are 2 completely separate interviews and conducted by 2 completely separate groups. So our application is completely separate from the charter school or your authorizer's application and capacity interview. This is just to make sure that those that are going to implement the charter school program fund, and that $2 million is to make sure that you all are financially sound and would be able to be financially sustainable once the grant runs out. This is just a map. We have this on our website, by the way. It's kind of cool. Nicola said she was going to steal it. And then this one has a little map, interactive map, where you can see where less than 5% of, or that the charter schools have not a significant presence. Okay, so here's the timeline for round 3. And as you can go back to round 1, when we did the first round, we did award 2 new schools the CSP grant, 2 expansions. For round 2, there was only 1 new school, because you all are just now the second group of applicants to go through, but there were actually 3 schools that were approved, and the 1 new school that received it just recently, they had to wait until our second round in order to receive the CSP grant. So here in round 3, where you can see it highlighted in blue, we do have 3 new school awards to award for this round. And there are more than 3 applicants on this call. So yes, there is a possibility that if more than 3 of you all get approved and you apply for the CSP grant, then it is a competitive grant. So the highest applicant or highest scoring applicant will receive that. We have 4 expansion grants, so a total, this should be 7. I will tell Chris about that when he gets on. And then for round 4, as you can see, we have 2, 4, and then 1. And then our round 5 is right at the end. For the subgrants, you have a 36-month term for your subgrant. You can split that in between, so it's a 3-year grant. You get the $2 million for 3 years. It can be split between the planning and implementation periods. It is a reimbursement basis, which is very unique for New Mexico. Apparently, after working with our other states across the nation that are receiving the charter school program funding, New Mexico is one of the few states that does not provide any funding to their new applicants during their planning year. A lot of other states do provide funding to schools during their planning year so that they can get teachers, salaries, facilities. Unfortunately, in New Mexico, that doesn't exist. So it is a perk to receive the charter school program grant because you can use these funds during your planning year to pay for salaries, to pay for yourself as you're working through this, as well as helping out with all of the areas that aren't typically funded or that are not funded actually at all during the planning period. And then it'll continue for the 2 years after the planning period as well as that. So when it says reimbursement basis, is that we actually call it at PCS&M a pre-bursement because you're getting the money ahead of time since you don't have any money to begin with during your planning year. So we front load you with the money and then you still provide all the documentation, federal documentation that you would need to if you were to do a reimbursement. That being said, you have to follow the federal allowable cost guide. So it is very strict, very picky. Our new fiscal coordinator will get the documentation she needs. And she's always trying to get to yes, but sometimes she has to say no. So it just depends on what's allowable and what's not allowable. And the awards can be adjusted or reduced based on progress toward objectives and monitoring compliance. If there are schools that are not following the monitoring compliance and or are having projection enrollment issues and become a risk as a subgrantee, then we can review that and look at that moving forward. Just some of the things that are allowable at the classroom level expense, and these are just examples. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but we just wanted to give you some ideas ahead of the mandatory training for you to think about. So some of the things that you could use right away once you are approved is furniture and things that could be used in the classroom. It's really anything that's portable. What you can't use the charter school program funds for is anything that would be permanent or capital outlay improvements for the facility that you are renting from, leasing from. So as long as you can pick it up and move it, you're probably pretty safe. So these are some examples of classroom level direct instruction expenses that could be used. You could use the funds for instructional support. If you notice, there are professional services that you could use it for, the workshops, any curriculum development. Roddy, you were asking about that. So if you're not using textbooks, but you want to invest in some time and people to create your curriculum for your school, you can use the funds in order to pay those people who would be creating your curriculum for you, or any other programs that you may want to invest in. School level operational expenses that could be used. What I'd like to highlight on this one, if you're getting any software programs or anything that requires a renewal or a subscription or any ongoing cost, those are not allowable. So things that are just one-time startup fees is what we're emphasizing. So if it's just the implementation and startup of a software or program or your SIS, your student information system, that is okay, as long as it's not an ongoing cost or a renewal, because we want to make sure that you would be able to continue your school without relying on the CSP funds. It's just to kind of get you going. The first year transportation expenses, there are a couple of schools that have already been awarded that are looking at getting buses, which you can use CSP funds in order to get buses. You just have to make sure that they are used for to and from travel from school, that you're not just getting it as a recreational or an activities bus. It has to be to and from school related. And highlight what the planning period funding can only be used for. So if you are going to use CSP funds to pay for staff salaries, that can only be used during the planning year. Once you start receiving money from the state, the SEG, once you open your doors and you receive money for your students, then you can no longer use the CSP funds for salaries. So these are just some of the items or examples of what you can use during the planning year when you don't receive any money from the state, but then you'll have to go transfer that over to your operational funds once you receive money from the state. The other thing that we've found to be a little tricky is the expenses related to bringing facilities up to code. So we have a lot of new schools that deal with issues with their facilities, and finding a facility and making sure that it is meeting the PSFA index number as well as the e-occupancy standard, which is different than PSFA because that's through the CID. So those two entities that you have to pretty much answer to in order to have students come into your building that you're potentially looking at. If it's missing some of those code requirements, and code is not administrative code, it's building code as well. But the PSFA standards uses the adequacy codes. So you've got the code is used, the word is used twice, but we just want to make sure that we're clear on what you can use CSP funds or not. When you are looking at the PSFA adequacy standard codes, make sure that you are looking at the ones that are applicable to charter schools, because the charter schools do have waivers for some of those adequacy standards that PSFA has. Some non-allowable costs there, you cannot use them for field trips of the $2 million, or any athletic equipment, any apparel. So if you want to buy a bunch of t-shirts for your new school, unfortunately, you can't use it for that, or any swag. If you wanted to print some pens or anything that has your logo on it, unfortunately, you can't use it for that. However, you can use it for recruitment materials. So if you want to do flyers, social media posts, if you want to do banners, mailers, hangers, anything like that, those are okay. Back to the capital improvements for any construction. You cannot use the funds to help the landlord of the building or the owner of the building make the improvements to their facility. It only has to be towards obtaining e-occupancy or meeting the PSFA adequacy standards for charter schools, and not any other renovations that would improve, for example, fencing. If you wanted to put fencing, because you wouldn't be able, I guess you could pick up and move your fence if you really wanted to, but you know what I mean. Any items that would be permanently fixed to the facility would also not be allowed. Any fixed cafeteria equipment, for example, a hood range for an oven would not count as one. However, if you had a portable refrigerator, you could do that. Any tables, serving, warming, all of that could be used. Gift cards and awards. This is the swag, the promotional materials that I was referencing. Salaries, as long as it's during your planning year only. Anything related to lobbying or dues or membership fees, as I had mentioned earlier as well. Again, these are just examples. And that is all I have. If you all have any questions regarding the CSP and the timeline.
So Valerie, you know me well enough to know I've got questions.
Go for it, Steve.
One of the things that we're going to need out here is we've got like portable storage units. We never have enough storage. Is that portable enough? The 20-foot, metal Connex. They're portable.
It's a good question. I think if you would need a foundation of some kind, if it's just a storage unit and you don't have to attach electricity or anything to it, then I think that's okay. Don't hold me to it, but it's definitely one that we could look into.
You put in their playground equipment. I assume like if you're installing swings or slides or something like that, that would probably be okay. I'm also thinking that there's an area where the kids are playing. It's kind of close to the road. We might want to have some fencing along It kind of goes with the playground, and
Yeah.
we could pull it out. The tougher one for us is going to be, we've got, we're going to be using a lot of our yurts out here. This is a tough one. Some of them may need additional insulation. Some of them may need a second door, or whatever. Those probably get problematic.
Yeah, I think with the PSFA, the life, health, and safety requirements for those, you have to be able to keep your classroom, I can't remember if it's between 65 and 78 degrees or something like that. So if your temperature is going to fluctuate in the environment, because I think your yurts have heaters, but they don't have air
Right.
conditioners. So if it gets warm enough to where it would get hotter than what the PSFA is considering, then they may require you to get a cooling unit in there.
We don't need a cooling unit in northern New Mexico, but we're also putting in a new admin building out here, and it's a federal grant, and they're making us put cooling units, which we will never use in 100 years. But
Okay, and then the fencing thing in PSFA's adequacy requirements, you do have to have fencing around playground areas, not the entire property.
Right,
but as
right.
long as it's around the playground area, which could technically count as CSP funds.
Okay, because that's my only concern is that if you get a kid running out there getting a ball or something, and a car's by you, you need to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's it.
Good question. That's it, Steve? I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know for now.
And Julie, you said that you didn't receive the email from Chris. Is that correct?
No. Was
Okay.
that sent today, right? I didn't,
It was sent this morning. Yes.
didn't receive one.
I didn't get it either.
All right. Roddy, did you receive it, Julia?
No, I did not receive it. I'll just send you a message. No.
Okay. I'll shoot a text
Oh, I
out
did
to
receive it.
you. Did get it? Okay. But that's not fair, Julia, because you're a member and a non-member. That's cheating. Okay, I'll make sure that you all get that. That way you have all of that with you. Any other questions?
Can you verify the dates again for the application for it? Because you said I think April 2025 or something.
Yeah, April 2nd will be the first training. So that's the invitation that you'll get out. And then it's just a Google Doc. It's really the phase one is super easy. You're just going to attend the informational session. You're going to fill out the Google Doc that says you are interested in applying for round 3, just so that we have that confirmation. And then after that, Roddy and everybody else, once you do that, you focus on your application for your authorizer. Don't worry about us. Don't even think about us. You just finish your application for either the PEC or APS, get that done in June. And then when after you submit your application, while you're just sitting around waiting for approval from June all the way to August, then you can start working on our application and just filling in that information. And then in August, when you go to your hearing and you find out whether you're approved or not, if you're approved, awesome. Then you'll take the next step with us after that. If you're not approved, then I hope you try again the following year to get approved. And that'll be the timeline. But we'll be in constant communication with you all to make sure that you don't forget the timeline or miss the information.
On April 2nd, I have a meeting for my son, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. Is there a way to make up for that?
Yes, there is. So in that email, at the bottom, it'll say if you have conflicts or anything, because it is mandatory, you can reach out to Chris and he can schedule something with you separately. Good question. Great. Thanks, Missy.
You are welcome. So that just leaves any other questions you have for our training today. Right, well, I've sent you guys the PowerPoint from me. I don't have Valerie's to send you. And I sent you all a Word document of the facilities master plan. So you should have those in your emails. And we will see you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.